Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Integral European Conference. In this workshop, Katia Trost will lead us on a conversation about the challenges of integrating body, mind, soul in our personal evolution. Katia is an independent health researcher, teacher, and practitioner of her own method. After being frustrated with even the most well-intended holistic methods that were mostly able to promote function, but rarely integration, she came up with a coherent concept and a path throughout the stages of evolution. Her approach alchemizes findings from the fields of biology, biochemistry, epigenetics, nutrition, medicine, ontogeny, neurology, psychology, alchemy, naturopathy, and spirituality. She has been working as an integrative practitioner for the last 20 years and frequently asks herself why personal, collective, and spiritual evolution are often so slow and difficult, or why the reality of life always seems to lag behind our highest evolutionary vision. Today, the most integrative circles accept the unity of body, mind, and soul. But can we really take this unity for granted? So in this session, Katia will argue that most people are not able to draw from an integrated body, mind, soul unit when they evolve. A merely functional internet connection between body, mind, and soul may promote some sort of evolution, but this form of evolution comes with a hefty trade-off: the emergence of shadows on an individual and collective level that grow bigger and more destructive the more we evolve in a non-integrated fashion. Katia states that this is a well-known problem in integral theory, that many first-tier problems can only ultimately be solved from the second-tier perspective. Therefore, integration may present itself like something of a chicken and egg situation. But is integration really a paradox, or are we missing something here? So in this workshop, Katia will apply the possibilities and implications of her findings to the health of the individual stages, as well as the collective health of the spiral as a whole. As a reminder, this workshop is being recorded, so if you choose to share something or ask a question, you're also giving your consent to appear on the video replay. And rest assured that none of the small group breakout rooms are being recorded throughout the conference. While Katia is speaking, the chat box will be disabled so that we contribute to a supporting learning container. If you have a question along the way, please send me a private message in the chat panel. So I'll curate and collect your questions and then share them with Katia through email. I'm also the tech host of the session, so if you have technical questions, please send me a private message in the chat box. So with no further ado, I will hand the mic over to Katia.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for introducing me, Graciela. I'm very excited to be here, and I think we'll need to start. So I'll just start my presentation here and hope everything works. All right. So just augment everything here. Welcome to my presentation, The Danger of Growing Beyond Your Shadow. And I will walk you through the contents of this presentation very briefly. I'll talk about me very briefly, and I will tell you why I'm here. I will, of course, tell you about the shadow and why it arrests evolution. And of course, I will give you a solution. And this is going to be about what I learned from my own work, how my work relates to the shadow. There's going to be a short experiential exercise, and there is going to be an example I thought I just saw that I was muted. I think I'm back again here. Okay. So I'm not sure you got the last part. So there's going to be an info and there is going to be Q&A. However, I don't think we'll make it today, but I will promise you to answer all your questions. I'll, tell you how later. And okay, let's start. And okay. So this is me, Katia Trost. I am a facilitator of integral health, and you may never have heard that term because, to my knowledge, I'm the first one to use it. What it means will hopefully become clear in the course of this presentation. And I called my own method integral medicine. And just as a side note, my method integral evolution was not named referring to integral theory. It was just a term that best fitted what I do. But as you will see, there are interconnections. So I worked as a therapist and a holistic practitioner for many years. And I first specialized in hormones. And then I got frustrated and the whole concept evolved into integral evolution. And basically today I will tell you why. So why am I here? My thesis is, and I know it's quite provocative, we need to grow up for real before we can evolve any further without destroying ourselves and others. The practical implications are that people can't have an embodied, healthy, and integrated emotional, mental, or spiritual development if their body is not developed properly to begin with. So I know integral theory for a while. I have learned quite a few things about it. However, I'd like to tell you that I'm not a super nerd and not a super expert in integral theory. I have my best friends are super fans, but I think I, know enough to make my case here today. And I really do love integral theory. And I also like spirodynamics. And as you will see, I will refer a little bit more to spirodynamics because it's more relevant to what I want to say. And as much as I love it, I'm also frustrated by it. And this is why. There's this quote, and it's based on Gurdjieff, the spiritual teacher. And they tell you what to do, but not how to do it. And I do know that there's a big awareness of the shadow in the integral community. However, I was missing one coherent and practical approach that really systematically implemented tools to guide people through the stages, preferably without the appearance of the shadow in the first place. Yeah, so when I think about integral theory, I see this big puzzle and I think it's really awesome, to really have this theory of everything, which really gives you all the pieces of the puzzle, and it's really great to know it. And yet, there is a certain emphasis on the parts, I feel. So we could look at the whole thing like this. And I'm sure you all know this. Those are the quadrants. And today I will be talking more about the physical body and the inner life. But above all else, I will be talking about basically the system, the builder of the puzzle. So my key points are, there is an important difference between integral cognition and integral embodiment. There is an important difference between conscious and unconscious development. Healthy development requires energy. The bigger the gap between your conscious and unconscious development, the more problems you will have. And I call this the super shadow. I'm not sure anybody else is using that expression, but I like it. So a few things before we begin. I will definitely give you more information because I have been teaching what I'm going to talk about today, and I know that people get overwhelmed. So don't worry if you don't get everything. I'll give you tons of more information later. I have research, I have quotes, I have footnotes. I'm more of a academically inclined person. So if you miss some of that here, please refer to my website. And I also assure you that while I will be talking more about theory today, it's a very, very practical method. So today, as I just said, I will focus more on theory, and I will give you a practical example, but that's all the time we'll have today. And as I already told you, I will answer all your questions through email if I have to. Okay, so let's go. I already introduced the idea that there is an integral cognition versus an integral embodiment. And this is how I see it. So many people have heard about the fact, or at least I think most people see it as a fact, is that we have around about 5% conscious cognition. But we also have 95% subconscious and unconscious parts of our mind. And when we think of cognition, it's more about those 5%. And I mean, cognition is a great thing. You know, there's nothing wrong with cognition. We all like it, we all need it. And there is also awareness, of course. It comes with cognition. Then there is embodiment. And I know that embodiment is also a term that has become very popular. There are people saying, for example, that embodiment is the new enlightenment. And I must say that I agree. And for me, at least how I define it, embodiment comes with the ability to apply knowledge. Very important. It comes with intentional control. And it also comes with the ability to take action. So in a way, the ability to walk the talk really requires embodiment in my experience. So there needs to be a good, I like to call it synchronization between cognition and embodiment. So this is how I like to see it. And what I'm saying is that usually that's not the case. We are mostly guided by our unconscious and subconscious. And since it is just such a big part of ourselves, if there's not a good synchronization between cognition and embodiment, we won't really be able to really influence our environment, to really put out there what we feel as our conscious will. So the next thing is, and I'm pretty sure all of you have seen this idea that stages are included, that, stage 1 starts, and then comes stage 2, and stage 2 includes stage 1. And that is how it should be. Now, is there an advantage to this? I will say yes. Why? Because this basically means that the whole, all the stages working together, they are functional. It's not about functionality of single stages. It's about functionality of the whole. So that's the ideal. Now, I will say that the ideal is not always or mostly not present. And that means that it will look completely different. There will not be an inclusion of stages. It's more a progressive evolution. And yes, there will be, again, a cognitive development, a cognitive collective evolution. However, there's not going to be inclusion. And one or the other stage may be somewhat functional in itself, but there is not much functionality of the whole. And what I have come to experience is that there is a functionality of a part, and basically the polar opposite of it would be the dysfunctionality of a part. So as soon as we leave the functionality of the whole, or we lose functionality of the whole, there will be a split into functionality and dysfunctionality. I will show you later how I think this happens, but this is one of my basic premises. So what can happen is that consciously, you may be, or I may be, we may be in stage 4, for example, and unconsciously, we may be at stage 2. And you can call this functionality as the light. And you could call this dysfunctional part that, again, referring to the previous page, is probably due to the 95% subconscious that we have. That's the shadow. It'll always be there if we don't pay attention to the functionality of the whole. So what could happen is that maybe one stage gets suppressed, or that it was kind of just jumped, and in my practice, I often see people jumping certain stages because maybe what they represent wasn't welcome to the parents or to the society. So sometimes whole stages just aren't well developed, and people just jump over to a next stage. And I'm saying that this will, there's going to be a trade-off to that. So what happens is, if we have that kind of functional, dysfunctional dichotomy of light and shadow, there's going to be the problem of regression. And I do know that in the integral scene, people like to use the expression "on a good day." And the thing is, what happens on a bad day? So we have a timeline, and we have the stages, and I am using the stages of spiral dynamics here. And we have, let's assume we have just a cognitive and partially functional development, like I described on the previous page on the right side. What will happen? We have peak experiences, which is great, on very good days. Then we have a certain center of gravity. This is where we are on, mostly good days. Then if we have not such a good day, we may regress further. And if we have even a worse day, we may just want to curl up in bed and not be able to function as a whole person anymore. So we just fall back to previous stages. Now, what's the difference if we have healthy integral development? We have peak experiences on very good days. We have a center of gravity on pretty good days. But the difference is that we stay in the center of gravity even if things go sour. Now, what I want to say is that it could happen under extreme stress that we do regress. However, the difference would be that it's mostly, it won't be for long, which means that first, we can often get out of the situation ourselves. The second thing is that we will have a so-called witness capacity that I'm pretty sure most of you have heard about, which is the ability to observe what's happening, to not suppress emotions, even if they're bad, and at the same time to stay in control and to be loving towards yourself, so you can basically hold the situation, hold paradoxes. So yes, there may be a regression. However, it will be quite different. And you probably won't need another person to get you out of this. No therapist, no, mommy who's going to come and hug you. And again, you're just going to be aware that you are, or that you have fallen back to a previous stage, which isn't a bad thing, of course. I mean, it's okay to go back to previous stages if situations arise or life circumstances arise that call for that kind of behavior. So, if something really, really bad happens, you would still be able to understand that something bad is happening. You would give in to, curling up in your bed, but then you would get out of it. You'll just, metabolize everything. Your resilience would kick in and so forth. The other thing is that you do have a certain adaptive flexibility, meaning, for example, you are walking on the street and it's a really beautiful day, and all of a sudden a thug comes up and really wants to bash in your head. So what do? You activate your red, you try to defend yourself, which is great. And the thug, he doesn't stop. So you really defend yourself with, you're able to, you're a master of martial arts. So, you really have the situation under control. However, the guy that you're basically beating up, he surrenders. Okay, he gives up, or he's just lying on the floor, and you'll be able to really switch back to a behavior that is more appropriate, meaning that, you probably maybe even call the police because, or the ambulance. So that's the difference, that you'll be able to really adjust. And if the guy gets up again, you think you're all peaceful, and then all of a sudden, oh my goodness, it's a psychopath, he starts beating you up again, you will immediately be able to switch back into red before you go back maybe to green and really try to see where he's coming from and talk to him and so forth. So this is the dilemma of a true integration versus false integration as I see it. You have functionality of the whole in true integration. You have earlier stages that are fully functional, and you have no loss of functionality of earlier stages with further evolution. In false integration, you have functionality of some parts, dysfunctionality of others. You have earlier stages that are dysfunctional, and you have no flexible adaptation to life through availability of all stages. Problems with that that I see are lack of embodiment, which means you may have really high ideas, or you may have, good morals, or I know that's not all when it comes to integration and integral evolution, but, I'm just giving you examples. You'd really, your mind can work in a very integrated fashion, but you simply can't represent that in your daily life. Maybe because you have dysfunctional relationships, you may be a great thinker at work, or you just have, health problems or something. There's something that just shows that you can't really put these great ideas that you have into action. Then you will probably have the super shadow attacking, which means the higher you get in your cognitive evolution, the bigger that subconscious pressure, all the stuff that wasn't integrated before, that's going to attack you. And basically, because it's subconscious, you won't be able to defend yourself from it. Or against it, which means, and I know that's quite provocative right here, second tier is not for real. Because I think that's where people want to get when they are interested in integral theory and spiral dynamics. I mean, that's basically where I want to get to. So that's the bitter pill that I had to swallow in my evolution or development, so to say. So what can be a solution? Hint, your body is your subconscious. That is a quote by Candace Pert. So I will first talk about my work, and it may seem a little random to you, but please bear with me. I promise you that it has everything to do with the shadow. So I will introduce here what I call the state of survival. And through my research, I came to understand that it is a universal principle. So I think everybody has a computer or knows about a computer. And everybody knows what happens when there is low battery or, electricity is just not available anymore. But here I'm talking more about the battery. So there's a lack of energy. What will happen? Well, your device will go into standby, right? That's just how it is. Some functions will be shut off, some apps won't work, and the computer will basically just restrict itself to basic functions. For example, I don't know, you can still type, but the screen will dim down, stuff like that. I think you'll know what I'm talking about. So what happens in our body, in humans, when there is lack of energy? Guess what? We also go into standby. So I want to bring your attention to this fact. I know that energy, so to say, some people have an understanding about subtle energy. Some people kind of know that our body needs energy. And yet I have understood in my career as a naturopath, as a therapist, that energy is always taken for granted. I mean, people just, they talk about it, but they don't really know what it is, really, and how it actually comes to be. Some people know about mitochondria, ATP, stuff like that, but still, it's so weird because everything evolves around energy in our world. I mean, we fight for oil. I mean, if we don't eat, we die. And yet people don't really talk about energy so much. So what I want to really bring your attention to is that as soon as there's a lack of energy, there will be a split into functionality of a part that is important for survival and dysfunctionality of a part that is not crucial for immediate survival. So in the survival mode or the standby mode, organs like the heart and lungs get activated while reproduction, digestion, the immune system get suppressed. On a psychological level, the survival mode will also lead to some loss of function of the whole, like selective hearing. It will lead to a tunnel vision, to suppression of emotions. So there's all this kind of stuff going on in this standby mode. So I now will show you how the survival mode plays out in the human body. There is a hormonal cascade in case of overwhelming stress. It's called general adaptation syndrome. It's well researched. It has been introduced into science by a guy called Hans Schally. He's the guy who termed the word stress. So if you say stress today, that's because Hans Schally came up with this word. So what did Hans Schally say? Okay, so let's say there is a stressor. A stressor is basically anything that forces you to adapt to your environment. That could be your internal environment, your external environment. And let's see what happens when that happens. So when there is a stressor, and it's a big stressor, what will happen? The body will just pump adrenaline into the system for fight or flight. Now, what happens if there is low energy? This cascade will start. First of all, thyroid hormone, which is another hormone that is actually there to promote or to raise your basic metabolic rate, which means that, if there's an abundance of energy, you'll feel warm, you'll burn calories like crazy. Now, if there's a lack of energy, that's not what the body wants. So thyroid hormone will get downregulated and your basic metabolic rate will just go down. Next, cortisol will kick in, another hormone, and cortisol comes from the adrenal cortex, and it wants to preserve energy. So basically these hormones, this hormonal cascade is preparing your body to preserve energy. And this is where standby starts. So cortisol is basically in your body saying, kind of directing the energy and saying, okay, you get lots of energy, you don't. And then sexual hormones also get tuned down because reproduction is not supposed to happen. And the body always kind of hopes that it's going to kind of get out of that situation soon. But if there's long-term stress, this cascade will become permanent. And at some point, cortisol will get down again. It will kind of lower and adrenaline will come up again. And that is when self-destruction takes place. So what the body will do, and it sounds really gross, but it's kind of what happens, is self-destruction. The body will eat up itself because it really needs new energy. So it will start burning fats. And if it has to, also proteins. So it will basically break down the body's tissue to enable energy production. And of course, the body always hopes, okay, I hope the situation is just short term. But, well, if it's not a short term thing, death will occur. So you have the state of living, then you go over to the state of survival. And again, if there's no new energy, death will occur. Before that, there are, destructions of organs and organ failure, stuff like that. And the interesting thing is that this principle that I have just demonstrated here, it's a general principle in the body as well. There's a very similar principle in the nervous system and in the immune system, to name a few. So again, this general adaptation syndrome is a very good reaction. It's very helpful for short-term survival. However, it's not meant for long-term stress. And in fact, today scientists say that 95% of all deaths are stress-related. So something that's really good short-term turns out to be not so good long-term, because there is going to be this split of function and dysfunction, and there is going to be a loss of functionality of the whole. So let's go into the self-destruction thing a little more. So from my work that was first concerned with restoring health, I understood that health really requires the restoration of energy. However, and that was the weird thing, I researched, I experimented, and I was successful in finding ways to restore energy. And when I'm saying restoring energy, I'm first talking about energy on a cellular level, okay? So that the body really knows how to produce energy on a cellular level. I know that there are, or I have come to understand that there are more forms of energy and there is subtle energy. However, if you want to work with subtle energy, you need to have cellular energy first. So it all starts with cellular energy. So I was very happy and I thought, oh, great, I know how to raise energy and how to pump up, energy production of the cells. Great. And then, oh my goodness, what did I see? The more I increased energy in my patients, the more self-destructive patterns were noticeable. So what I saw were things like flare-up of allergies, intolerances to food, inflammation, autoimmune disease, on a physical level, anxiety, tendency for accidents, breaking off of relationships, sabotage of the therapy, all these things were happening. And I just thought, this is such a paradox. I don't get it. I really couldn't understand what was going on. It made no sense at all at first. And then it dawned on me. I was triggering the self-destruction through the increased energy. And again, at first I was just, what is this? So I was running into some kind of obstacle that was causing self-destruction. So before that, in my world, it was, I'm a naturopath. So I wouldn't say I believe, I am convinced that self-healing is our natural state. So I thought, okay, more energy, more self-healing. That makes sense. And nope, it didn't. So there was this obstacle. So I came to understand that health, or the restoration of health, is restoration of energy, yes, minus self-destruction. So that was my big epiphany, so to say. So what were those obstacles? Because that was the next thing that I needed to take care of, because now I understood, okay, there are obstacles. I can't just pump up energy. Otherwise, I'll just trigger self-destruction. And this was not just a random thing. It occurred basically always. So it was basically always there. It was really a pattern. Okay, so I needed to get into the self-destruction thing. And I found out that self-destruction is caused by some key obstacles, and that they come up in a certain order. So first, nervous system, obstacle number 1, so-called improper wiring, caused through so-called neuromotor immaturity. I know those terms are very unknown, and I'm going to explain them a little later, but for now, I just want to introduce the obstacle. Second, the psyche. I saw that developmental trauma was really playing a big part in all of that, and mostly people were emotionally immature. They could not self-regulate. They needed somebody else to regulate them. So I knew that developmental trauma is a big thing. Then epigenetics. That's obstacle 3. And I know that epigenetics may be known to some of you. So very briefly, epigenetics is basically not what the genes are. It's not about the genes. It's about how they are translated and read. I mean, imagine a library, something like you have this vast library with all that knowledge, and those would be the genes, the books. But you don't read all the books in the library. You just go to a certain section and you just pick the same books over and over again. This will kind of narrow down the flow of information. And that's a thing that happens in epigenetics. So genes can be switched on or off. And another thing, another term that, and I'm pretty sure you don't know that one, is a term that was introduced by the old homeopaths. And they said that drugs, medical drugs, but some other stuff as well, that they would permanently change the way the body regulates itself. And nowadays they're actually finding proof for that. I have found research about how, very well-known drugs such as ibuprofen and stuff like that, how they have epigenetic effects. And the problem with epigenetics is that oftentimes when some switch flips, it doesn't flip back just because, say, you stop taking the ibuprofen. So that was basically the epigenetic part, and I call this etheric immaturity. Why? Because I have found out that epigenetics really kind of overlap with morphic fields, and I'm not sure I would say that somewhere else, but I think in this kind of crowd I can. I think most of you will be familiar with Rupert Sheldrake. So the concept of morphic fields plays into epigenetics, and I don't think we understand this 100%. I really don't claim I do, and it's all very young, very fresh. But I've found out that it's very, very important for therapy. And yes, I do think that I found ways to influence that area. And then there's the hormone system. And this is where the actual lack of energy will play out, as I showed you before in my slide with a hormonal cascade. So in a way, you want to tackle the lack of energy. But before you do, and that's important, you will have to basically take care of obstacle 1, 2, and 3 to get to obstacle 4. So that's what I found out. And I mean, what I'm presenting you here, of course, is the result of many experiments, a lot of research, but that's the end result. Yeah, so that is what we have to do to finally get rid of our lack of energy. Now, I want to introduce another term, and that is very important if we want to achieve self-regulation. Why is self-regulation so important? Because I'm saying that self-regulation is what is the result of an integration of body, mind, and soul. I will say that self-regulation is a result of it. The first time a healthy human being reaches self-regulation is when people come of age. At age 21, I mean, biologically, I know in most countries it's with, when you reach the 18th year, but I will say it's 21. So some of you may have heard that term, homeostasis. So homeostasis is basically a state in which all body functions stay stable, and you're still able to react to your environment appropriately without losing overall function. That's the interesting thing. There is homeostasis in dysfunction, which, for example, the hormonal cascade can be seen as a sort of a homeostasis. So the body's trying to make the best out of the situation with low energy. But what I'm talking about is homeostasis in a much broader term, meaning basically the ideal state in which you stay flexible to adapt, to evolve. So homeostasis has 4 prerequisites. You need a plan, and this plan is basically what I have been talking about. You need, genetics that are flawless, but you need epigenetics. And nowadays people are saying, researchers are saying that only 2% of all our function is governed by genetics, while 98% is governed by epigenetics. So this is important if we want to achieve homeostasis. We also need resources. Again, many things can be resources, but I will say the most basic resource is energy. However, it's not all. Resources could be love, for example, or other things that we need. Then we have a chain of command, and that is a very important concept, because the chain of command means that there's an order in the body. So in the body, no organ just does what it wants to do. Now, it's really important to have a certain order. And as in society, it's important to have a certain hierarchy. And I do know that, especially in integral theory, there's this concept of dominator hierarchies, and that's not what I'm talking about. However, I will say that even in the body, if there's no healthy development, there is a dominator hierarchy, and that would be the mind. The mind kind of takes control. People go into the head, and they become dominated by their consciousness, so to say, or their mind. And there's no integration. So what I'm talking about is not a dominator hierarchy. It's basically an integral hierarchy. It's a functional hierarchy that is flexible. So that was the hierarchical organization of organs, and there is a certain chain of command. And then there needs to be a unifying principle. And these prerequisites, those 4 points, I didn't make that up. Those were introduced by the founding father, or the godfather of homeostasis, a guy called Cannon. He was a physician, and he really researched into human physiology. So he came up with all these things. So the unifying principle is a combination of the nervous system in its organic form. And again, I briefly introduced the concept that we have a nervous system, and most people know that, but it's really important to understand that the nervous system is not just the psyche. The nervous system is basically our internal communication system. It's what kind of connects the inside with the outside and really coordinates everything. And it's not just the psyche. So there is kind of an organic side to the nervous system that most people don't pay attention to. I did not know much about this. I have not learned much about this when I trained as a naturopath. And I was educated, I was trained by a doctor, and he was very diligent. He talked a lot about physiology, but these things that I'm talking about here, nobody taught me this. So I had to do, my own research and find out about these things. And that's very important because this nervous system thing, it's a key piece. And of course, there's also the psyche. So the psyche and the nervous system, they kind of work in unison, and they form the unifying principle. And the unifying principle is basically the boss. Okay, so it's on top of the chain of command. It's what's actually guiding everything in your body. Yes, there's a conscious part to that, of course, but there's also an unconscious part. And I will say that the subconscious can help you self-regulate if it's synchronized with the conscious. So let's get into this chain of command thing in a little more detail. So there is this chain of command, and from infancy to adulthood, we develop. Now, our organs, they develop in a certain order. And again, they will be there from the beginning. I mean, you will have a brain when you're born, you'll have a liver, you'll have a heart. However, the functionality of the organ will not be there from the beginning, which means you come with the organ. However, it doesn't necessarily know so well what to do. For example, the immune system, it is basically only functional when children are about 7 years old. It is quite well known that little children, they can't really rely on logic so much. Why? Because their brain needs to develop certain functions. So there is a certain developmental order in which organ systems mature, so to say. So first is the nervous system. Then comes the psyche. Then come epigenetics. Then comes the hormonal system. Then comes the immune system. So I know this is a lot to take in. I'm really trying to make this palpable for you, so to say. So the nervous system will always be the most important thing, okay? Because if it just gets shut down, you'll die. So it really needs to be operational. Then comes the psyche. Same thing, if you're just crazy, if you are deranged, whatever, you can't even run away from the tiger anymore if you don't understand that the tiger is your enemy. Then come epigenetics, and that is more the idea that, your environment is shaping you through fields, through environmental insults. And then comes the hormonal system. And only last comes the immune system. So what does that mean? The nervous system basically tells all others that are, quote unquote, below it what to do. So it's not the immune system that calls the shots. It's not the hormonal system that calls the shots. It is the psyche, sort of, but however, it's the organic part of the nervous system that is really on top. And again, of course, this is not truly separated, but I need to kind of show you this concept. It all is integrated, of course, and it's integrated from the beginning, but not in a truly functional way of the whole, because otherwise there wouldn't be children. Okay, children are basically that they are not fully functional yet. They can't really self-regulate. And then there is ontogenesis. Okay, that means that there's this hierarchy, and the hierarchy will evolve over time, which I already mentioned. So that is basically what we have to master from infancy to adulthood. And as you can see, stuff that's really important for survival will be there from the beginning, meaning that, for example, that hormonal cascade, it'll be very active in small children. You know, they just pump lots of adrenaline into their system, while an adult ideally can self-regulate and stop that output of adrenaline. And I can tell you that, for example, in the nervous system, which has a very similar mechanism, that in children, for example, if they get stressed, they need an adult to down-regulate the output of noradrenaline, for example. Adults, ideally, and that's where the problems come up, an adult ideally will, through awareness, basically, if an adult gets frightened, there will be a fright reaction. The adult will look into that direction, and if the adult sees, oh no, this is not a threat, immediately the system will downregulate. So it's really like that. It's so fascinating if things go well. So again, things that are more important for living, and living is, the opposite from the state of survival. So stuff that is basically important for us to really evolve in a healthy way, to really individualize, to really grow in complexity, to go into higher levels of brain development. That stuff comes later in our development. So basically, babies come with a default mode, so to say, that these little kids, they're very stressed. They're stressed by default. And stress, again, is, in a way, it's an expression of a lack. Okay, they're lacking something. And adults come and satisfy the need, whether it's food or a love or touch. But as a default mode, infants are basically poled on the stress, on the lack. And adults ideally are not. So how do my findings relate to the shadow? So that was what I've told you before. Health is the same as restoration of energy minus self-destruction. Okay, what happens now? I will say that when it comes to collective evolution, and I'm of course referring to the health of the stages as a whole of the spiral, yes, we have restoration of energy minus the shadow. Because I'm making an analogy here, I'm saying that the same principle that applies to the individual development in the body, and that principle really, it runs through many areas in the body on a physical level. It runs through emotional levels, and that this is basically what forms the shadow. So if we want to evolve as a species, we need energy, we need more resources. However, we need to tackle our obstacles to the free flow of energy. Otherwise, we will be attacked by the shadow. Yeah, I know that this is a very bold claim. And what I'm saying is that very many people are basically caught in this split of function and dysfunction. And to make it a little more practical for you, I came up with the idea that I would like you to try this out. So just a little short recap here. We have the state of survival, which is a universal principle. It's true for computers, it's true for humans, and I'm claiming it's also true for our collective evolution. Yep, so as a species, we go into standby, function, dysfunction, we get into the split, and then we are prone to self-destruction. Yep. So that's the shadow. It's the standby mode and self-destruction combined. Okay, now comes my practical experience. And this is about the wiring again. And again, because it's so little known, I'm going to walk you through a little exercise here. So please bear with me if you want to participate. So first, and again, please just listen me out, because, you know, there's a little caveat at the end and I don't want you to get hurt or anything. So you can find a smooth surface to stand on. No mattresses or yoga mats. Second, you stand on one leg. You don't hold on to anything. You really just stand on one leg. Doesn't matter which one. Third, you close your eyes. Notice eye fluttering, if there's any. I will time 30 seconds. Try to remain in position the whole time. I want to have just 2 or 3 people, maybe as a sharing. I don't think we have time for more. I just want to know what you experienced. So I think you will have to write, Graciela, you know, just tell very briefly what you have experienced.
Katia, if people can open their mic to share.
They can. Yes, they can. They can open their mic as well. Great idea. Okay, let's do that.
Please come in. Feel free to share if you want.
Yeah, so there's just a little word of caution. Please don't do this if you have a bad sense of balance, if you know that, if you have hypoglycemia, if you have dizziness, any neurological condition, or any acute disease. Okay, so really, you know, I don't want you to feel bad if you're not feeling good today. Just don't do it. Just listen to what others have to say. Okay, so I will switch over here very briefly to the mode where I can be seen, hopefully. So I'm going to be timing this little thing. So I will just punch in 30 seconds. So if you want to participate, just find a smooth surface and stand. So I'll give you about 10 seconds now to stand, and don't go on one leg And I will time 30 seconds, and I will say when 10 seconds have passed and 20 seconds have passed, and you can kind of just see how long you can stand, what happens. So get ready and start. Ten seconds. 20. And stop. You can all open your eyes again, and people who want to share can share.
If you want to jump in, just open your mic. If you are more comfortable in sharing on the chat, feel free.
Maybe I can go then. So good evening.
Hi.
Just I try. I'm the martial art guy, so I'm used to the kind of things, and yet I feel so miserable.
Yeah. I mean, that's such a good example, you know, because I get guys who are very well in shape, and then I let them do this little exercise, and what happens, they completely lose control of their body, and they don't know what's happening, and they say, what the hell, what is happening? And I say, well, that is your nervous system that hasn't been developed properly. And I hear you. I've been there. I've done that. So thank you very much for sharing. Yeah, you know. So again, if you have more questions, we can talk more later, but I would like to finish the presentation first. But thank you so much for sharing. Has anybody else tried that?
Yes, I tried it, and I was fine to stand with my eyes open. As soon as I closed my eyes, like 3 seconds, and I was all wobbly.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Yeah, that's a very usual reaction. Yes. Thank you.
I have Victoria. Victoria raised her hand.
Yeah, I also tried it. I do yoga for a long time, so I'm actually used to standing on one leg, but with closed eyes, it's very different.
Yeah.
And I was almost jumping all around until I found some, until I put one leg on another and put it in some asana. So I could find some balance.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah. Very quickly, I will tell you what this is, okay? So basically, we have a GPS system. That's the ideal, okay? I mean, our nervous system, that's what I'm saying. That's the nervous system part. That's not the psyche. So we have this nervous system that it basically works like a GPS. It works with the eyes, the ears, and our sense of balance, okay? And it should work with our eyes closed. However, if it's not set up properly, it won't work. And you will only notice that when you close your eyes. Why? Because some sensory information gets lost. And this is where I can actually see if you can deal with gravity. And in a way, our development really depends on us being able to deal with gravity. Why? Because to know who you are, to know thyself, as people say, you need to first know where's above, where's below, where's right, where's left. And again, Victoria said something very, very common, and you know, she's very well trained. She knows how to stand on one leg. So she trained us. This is a function. This is what I want to show you. She trained a function. She trained the function standing on one leg. She did this well. She's a pro. She can do this probably, you know, when she's half asleep. However, when you look at the function of the whole, the nervous system, her nervous system is not wired up properly, because otherwise this change, you know, she did something a little bit different than she usually does, and her body was lost. And that's what I'm saying. There is a lack of adaptive response here. And that's something I see very often. And again, I was there. I'm a ballet dancer. So, okay, I'm used to turn. I'm used to turn, however, with my eyes open. And then I needed to close my eyes and I ran into the same problems. And now, yes, I can close my eyes without, I can stand and stand. Okay. So that was our little experiment today. And I would like to go back to the presentation now. So let me switch back here. Thank you so much for trying this out. So yeah, that was our little exercise. So this is, you know, to just show you how much of these kinds of problems I see in the beginning of integral treatment, you know, of people I see. So I can really say, and I know this sounds very bad, you know, it sounds very grim. However, I'm not saying that these people are not able to do things. I mean, we just heard all kinds of people, and you guys are very fit. You guys, you know, I'm pretty sure you all have a career. You all are good people. So this is not what I'm talking about. So what I'm talking about is the function of the whole. And when I come from this perspective of the function of the whole, what I see in 95% of the people that I examine, so to say, 95% of adults have a lack of cellular energy already. Okay, so all the stuff about the hormonal system, it will apply to these people one way or the other. What we just tested, this wiring of the nervous system, that's the neuromotor immaturity. And honestly, 100% of the people I see have that. And of course, you can say, yeah, the people you see, you know, they come to your practice because they have a problem. Yes, that could be true, but I know the signs, I know the symptoms, I know how, you know, I observe many people, I walk outside, I see how people move, and I can see these developmental gaps, even outside of my practice. I can see it in their face, I can see it on their body. So 100% of the people that I see, and I will say probably of the adults, have some sort of developmental problem in the wiring of the nervous system. 100% of people have developmental trauma. And again, I mean, this doesn't mean that people, you know, are not functional. Again, people can be heavily traumatized and highly, highly, highly functional. I was a good example for that as well. So, you know, 100% just didn't get in their infancy what they needed. So I'm talking more about the industrialized countries. Maybe I think in you know, more traditional populations, it may be different, but this is what I'm seeing in industrialized countries. And 100% of epigenetic obstacles, because even if people say, oh, you know, I haven't done any drugs, I don't take medication much. Well, I didn't either. And still, I mean, I had my wisdom teeth removed, you know, I got anesthesia. I took birth control pill, you know, worst thing that I did in my life. But, you know, all these things, and they did change my body. They did make my body not be, you know, my body wasn't able anymore, or not yet, depending on how you see it, to regulate itself properly, because certain switches were kind of flipped. However, the good news is that all of this, all of what I've been telling you, can be worked on also in adulthood. So none of this is set in stone. And that's the good news. So in a way, what I'm seeing is that we just can't handle the complexity. Okay, so again, if you close your eyes, you're making something more complex, and that's a good simple test to see, can I handle more complexity or not? And this is just a small example of stuff that we are confronted with on a daily basis as adults in a complex society. So yeah, I can say that adults are kept in survival mode because they have lack of cellular energy. They have problems with the wiring of their nervous system. They have dissociated ego parts that run the show, and that is due to developmental trauma. And they have a so-called fixed state of survival through inheritance and life conditions. So that is another piece of bad news, is that through epigenetics, the state of survival, you can pass it down. Even if you have all the food you need, even if you have a loving partner, certain states of self-destruction, certain states of dysfunction get passed down over the generations. And that's what I call the fixed state of survival. And that's where morphic fields come in. That's where flip switches by drugs come in. So, I know this is a lot and just very briefly, but this is what I see. So again, to make it even more, so you can grasp it even more, what I'm saying is that we all have great potential. I mean, there's so much potential in the world. However, there's a difference between potential and what can be embodied. So we come with a hardware. Great. Yes. No, this is no product placement, but I know you know what I'm talking about. And we come with an operating system. And this is one of the most neglected parts, in my opinion, in psychology and medicine in our society. And then we come with software, or we acquire software. So we have the potential as a species that comes with the hardware. And, our brain, our heart, our reproductive organs. Then we have manifested potential as an individual, ideally. And we have, our body's perception, we have emotions, we have our mind, we have our spiritual side. So this is where we all want to get to, right? So what's in the middle? So what's actually facilitating all of that? Well, it's our operating system, and that has a potential, and it needs to be developed on an individual level while we grow up. So we need this operating system to be updatable, because what happens if you can't update your phone anymore? Well, you stop. You stop it. It won't work. At some point, all the apps won't work anymore. And this is what will arrest development. If it's not able to update itself, to grow in complexity, we have a problem. So we need to be able to do downloads. Okay, we need to be able to take in from our environment, maybe even from higher means. We need to be able to take in that information to be pulled up in the ladder of evolution. And again, we need to update the system every once in a while. We need to communicate with our environment, and that's what our operating system, which is the unifying principle, by the way, that kind of synchronizes with the psyche. So the operating system is basically our sensory apparatus. It's a functional unit that takes in information, organizes it, and puts it out again, for example, in form of movement. So through updates, and that corresponds to the developmental stages, downloads from and communication with the environment and the cloud, which is the morphic field, for example, the meme, that will allow for integration. So if we want to get from the hardware to the software, we need to really have a good operating system. And what we are focusing on in our society, in my opinion, is the mind. It's this very little thing here that we think is going to promote wisdom or promote enlightenment even. And that's not my experience. So my experience is that we need the mind, but we need all of these things, and they need to function together. So, people say, Carl Jung said that, who was the one who coined the name shadow. He said, we need to illuminate the shadow with consciousness. So I would say it's more a peripheral result. It's not that we conquer the shadow with our mind. It's the integration that will do it. This is where I come back to, they'll tell you what to do, but not how to do it. So I'm basically trying to say, in my experience, that's how to do it. Oh yeah, I forgot this little thing. Yes, integration. That's the most important thing that the operating system may provide if it's developed well. So, another little tidbit here, most of you have heard of the triune brain, which means we have our reptilian brain, we have our limbic system, and the neocortex. And they were kind of in like stories of a building, like floors of a building. However, most people don't understand that this is the ontogeny part. We come with a brainstem. This is the baby's default mode. Then we will develop the limbic system. And that will only be much later, we'll be well into our childhood when that really starts to develop. And this is important for mutual relationships, give and take, and so forth. And only later, much later, basically from puberty to when we are 21, our frontal cortex will evolve. And the frontal cortex, again, has an integrating function, has a coordinating function if things go well. And, most people, they think, oh yeah, we have a triune brain. No, we have to develop a triune brain. It doesn't come out of the box. So our problems in our time are that, we have an individual and collective evolution. And that's maybe 1000, CE, in the Middle Ages somewhere. And then we have the present. So in the Middle Ages, we went over to Enlightenment, we went over to industrialization, and are now probably somewhere in postmodernism or a little further sometimes, but mostly. So our environment is increasing in complexity. So we kind of, in our collective evolution, at least on our mental level, we kind of jumped up the ladder of these stages. So we went from kind of blue-orangey to orange-green to green-yellow in the industrialized countries, but only, in my view, as a cognitive evolution. And at the same time, unfortunately, from present, we have basically, our natural resources are not as good as they used to be. And they enable embodied integration. So we have less energy than our ancestors. We have less integration in our minds than our ancestors because, the wiring of the nervous system, it has a lot to do with healthy movement, with not being interrupted by drugs, for example, with, toxic environments and so forth. So in a way, we have a more complex environment and fewer resources. And I think that is a big problem. So putting it all together is that, I know this is a lot again, ideally we come into adulthood and, I match the stages here with individual stages of development. And I know that, in the integral community, there are many ways to see this. And I just want to make my point here. So this is no absolute, but this was the easiest way I could show you what I mean. So in a way, from 18 months, or until 18 months, we're basically all in beige, from spiral dynamics. And then we progress to yellow. And I will say that ideally, a person, when he or she becomes an adult, will basically be able to function in yellow from, in an integrated fashion. So there's all kinds of stuff that needs to be tackled, that needs to be integrated until then, from the wiring of the nervous system to the emotions. We start in symbiosis. We need to develop our witness capacity that I found out happens when we get personal autonomy, which is basically the stage in which we say, I am, we say, this is me in the mirror. Our pituitary gland needs to mature, our limbic system needs to mature, our sexual glands mature last, interesting enough. Then we have, these stages of mind evolution. I know I'm referring to Keegan. There are many different ways to refer to mental evolution. However, my basic thesis is that by the age of 21, if things actually went well, we should be able to reach yellow or second tier in an integrated fashion. And basically what I'm saying is that there doesn't need to be a shadow. There doesn't need to be a shadow. And if we have a shadow, we can take care of it. We can integrate it. When we integrate the missing steps in our development. And when I'm saying this, I'm saying that I've never seen somebody going through this development without developing a shadow yet. However, I have seen people who are very young, about mid-20s, in 2 to 3 years, really reach emotional maturity, reach integration in yellow. So we're almost finished. That would be an example of it. So there's a slow increase in energy, very important. So not to upset self-destruction. We need to integrate neonatal reflexes, which tackles exactly the stuff that you guys experienced in the little exercise. We need developmental trauma therapy. And I have basically customized a method that I was using before. So I have really worked on the stages, what needs to happen when, how do we develop the witness capacity, how do we break symbiosis, how do we mature emotionally. Then we need to restore the energy metabolism through, basically getting our epigenetics in order by nutrition, nutrients, very specific nutrients. They need to come in a specific order. You can't just take nutrients. It doesn't work. You need to really do things in a very specific order. I find energy medicine, I'm a homeopath by training, very helpful, but again, not just taking some medicine. No, it needs to come in a very, very specific order that I can't get into right now. So if all that happens, like a miracle, embodiment happens. And when embodiment happens, there's going to be cognition automatically. So that was my little example. And there's a German proverb. It says, the grass doesn't grow faster when you pull at it. So let's get back to the roots. And on a positive note, it is never too late to integrate your shadow. I think we now have all the knowledge that we need to really become a happier society, to really end suffering. I'm really convinced we have all we need to do it. We just need to do it. So I think we have all the keys we need. So if you want to know more, you can go to my website. There's tons of information on there. You can, I've made a little quiz if you want to take it. It's for free. I have an ebook if you want to. Yes, you'll have to leave your email address, but I think that's a small price to pay because it's really a very extensive quiz. There's lots of free information. I really believe in information. So please, if you're interested, go check out my webpage. And now I just want to say thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your attention. I really hope it was not too much. It probably was. I really try to make it, relevant for you. And thank you again. And as I thought, we won't have time for questions now, but I promise you, if you write me at info@integralevolution.com, I will answer all your questions by tomorrow if you want to. So just come on, write me, and I will answer all the questions you have. So thanks. Have a good evening. Have a good rest of the conference. And yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm very excited, and I really hope I can make a contribution to, well, the integral community. Thanks again.